Good morning. Good morning, viewers, to another great and live session about outdoor wilderness and learning, OWL in short. As you all know, OWL is an initiative of the Wanderers in the learning and development space, and it conducts specialized training and workshops. And we have partnered with highly experienced trainers and facilitators to help corporates create winning teams. It also serves as a great platform for eminent speakers and facilitators. Like you will hear one today. He's a brilliant historian, speaker with a powerful experience across spectrum of industries. We also offer storytelling and entrepreneurship workshops. When we started these chat sessions in early June, we were still trying to make sense of the pandemic and its related impact in our lives and our businesses. So most of our tasks then were focused on how and what we could do to tide over the crisis. But today, there are signs of a revival in the economic activity, though the pandemic has not yet seen its end. As you all know, we all have tried, tested, succeeded, failed, succeeded, attempted once again. So many strategies that were discussed threadbare in virtual meeting rooms across the world. So our talk today will be something completely special, completely different, beyond dates and battles. So these are leadership lessons from medieval Indian history. Yes, you heard me right. You'll be amazed when you listen to Pradeep Chakravarthi, and he'll be talking about how history can become such a powerful tool for leaders to understand thoughts, recognize feelings, and alter behavior if we change the lens with which we look at it. So today we have a person with us who has immense experience in the corporate world and is a thought leader in the learning sector. Pradeep Chakravarthi is a behaviorist with a twist to the past. And he says history is not so boring anymore. By the way, he's also distinguished by his appearance. He wears a sexy white South Indian dhoti, accessorized with funky angavastram. I'm sure he's not wearing that today, but he has a brilliant sense of humor and a lovely mellifluous voice and a deep knowledge of ancient, not just Tamil history and literature, but Indian history, literature, and now global history also. By the way, he has written books, 5 books, and his corporate experience with TVS, Cognizant, Infosys, and McKinsey, and his exceptional educational background with London School of Economics, JNU, Delhi, is something which you will get a rare and insightful perspective. This is what he brings to the audience. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor and privilege today to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Pradeep Chakravarthi. Here's a request to the audience before Pradeep starts. You're free to post questions to Pradeep on your OWL YouTube channel chat. One by one, the questions will be taken at the end of Pradeep's brilliant presentation. Without taking more time, let me extend a warm welcome to Pradeep and hand over the stage to him. How are you, Pradeep, today? Good morning.
Good morning, Rajendra. Pleasure to be here and really happy and enjoying the cool weather in Chennai, which we don't get very often.
Lovely. So that's a great change. Cool. I remember coming in Chennai once and I was sweating in December end. So
very good be like that. Yeah.
That's great. So nice to know. So Pradeep, I hand over the stage to you. It's a real pleasure. Yes, please.
Thank you, Rajendra. Is the screen visible? The PowerPoint visible?
Yes, it is.
Wonderful.
You can go ahead. Yeah.
Right. I wanted to start with a picture, and that's me right here in the front as a little boy. So there was a time when I had a lot of white hair, I had a lot of black hair, and a lot of hair on my head. This is a photograph taken about 20-25 years back or 30 years back, and it shows you a very different concept of history that I have, or a very different relationship I have with history. All of us would have studied history in school. We would have been forced to study it. Some of us might have had the privilege of having good teachers who taught it through a story, so that makes it interesting. Some of us would have studied it because we had to study, and we would have hated it because of the dates and the numbers and the battles and everything. But I'm sure all of us would have said, why the hell is this relevant to me in the future? I want to be a doctor or a software engineer or whatever it is. Why would history be of use to me? Fortunately, I had a very different experience of history. So, contrary to what more people think, that I'm not a Bengali, I come from deep, deep south Tamil Nadu. And in my town of Palangote, which is very further, which is right deep down in Tamil Nadu, my ancestors have lived in this home for almost 6 generations. And I was actually the 6th generation to stay there. And the house started at one end of the street and finished at the other end of the street. So it was about 10,000 square feet of built up area. And upstairs alone, just the 4 rooms upstairs was about 5,000 square feet. It was a massive home by any standards. And in our home, for the 6 generations, we had a very different convention. Anything that was broken, that was not fit to be used, we'd not throw it out, but we'll actually lug it up into the attic and throw it there. So the entire 4 rooms upstairs, which is about 6,000 square feet, was all filled with junk that belonged to 6 generations. And you know, in those days, right, that people had many, many children. So you multiply the 6 generations by every couple having at least 6 or 7 kids on their own. You'll get a sense of the kind of jumble that was there upstairs. So we had old school textbooks, we had clothes, we had vessels, broken furniture, broken toys, suitcases, broken things, anything broken went upstairs. So I grew up in an environment like this where every summer holidays, I would be rummaging around these 5, 6 rooms upstairs between 1 and 3 o'clock, and I could do anything that I wanted so long as I didn't wake up the adults downstairs who were having a nap. And because of this, I developed a very different understanding of history, not so much Indian history, but my family's history. And I had a very, and I would look at these old textbooks of uncles and aunts and granduncles, grandaunts. Some people I couldn't even figure out how they were related to me, but I know they were because they were related some 4 generations back. And their school textbooks would have the same kind of sarky comments or the same kind of doodles that I would have done in my own textbook. So I started seeing history in a very, very different way. And I hope today you will go back with also seeing history in a very different way. Because if you see it from this different lens that I'm going to share with you, it will be very, very relevant for your own life, whatever subject you're doing, whatever profession you have. This is an advertisement that came way back in 1855, which was before I'm sure you were born, your parents were born, and possibly your grandparents were born as well. This came from a magazine that was for the princes of princely India, of royal courts. And here is Ram Dutt, an astrologer from Sri Lanka, who's advertising various talismans or good luck charms. Yeah. There's one for honor, riches, and learning and greatness. So 7 rupees, which in the 1850s was a massive amount. Huh? Health and physical strength, 7 rupees, 8 annas again. Power of eloquence and speeches. So I certainly need that. So that's another 7 rupees and 8 annas. So if you keep looking down, you will find that for men's love to women, 7 rupees, 8 annas. But for women's love to men, it's 10 rupees, which is way more expensive. And I'm told by my nephews and nieces who are very active on the dating circuit, on apps like Tinder and the pub circuit and all that, that even today men get a worse deal than women when it comes to the dating game and when it comes to these kind of entertainment. So pretty much nothing's actually changed. So sure, today I don't know what this gemming is and what plumbago is and all that. But generally, if you look at this advertisement, jokes apart, what it tells you is whether it's in the 1850s, whether it's in 2022, whether it is with a lockdown, with a virus, without a virus, fundamentally as human beings, what we want has not really changed. Whether it is generations before, whether it is in India or in the Amazon rainforest, in Russia, in Australia, New Zealand, Europe, Africa, wherever you go, people still want to be respected. We still want to be rich. We want to be seen as great. We want to have physical strength and health. We want to be loved by somebody else, and we want to have good luck. And I think that's really what these talismans are all about. And this is the fundamental point of what I'm going to say, which is our needs as human beings or as living things, not even human beings, are eternal and universal. Lockdowns, viruses, technology, all of this might change the context. But fundamentally, as human beings, we are the same. Our character hasn't changed and will not change in the future as well. So, if we look at history from this angle of how different people in the past have had the same needs that I have had the same fears that I have, how have they fulfilled their needs? How have they acted on their fears? Then history becomes very, very relevant to us. It is immaterial about the dates and the numbers. In fact, today I'm going to talk about very little dates and numbers. But what matters is when you're reading the history of a country or reading the history of a person, or a history of an event, look at what could be the basic needs and fears those people could have had and how they operated to fill that. And when you translate it, you will find that you as a human being also have the same needs and the same fears. And that will help us understand how our own behavior functions, our own speech functions. And in fact, at another level, you can look at your own history, your own family history, your own history to look at in the past, how have you done certain things? Has that panned out, not panned out? And that becomes a powerful tool for learning and improving your performance. So the big point that I want to make, especially because I do this for organizations, I look at how history can change behavior in organizations. Any organization is started because somebody had a great idea. But if that organization has reached scale, it is only because in the hearts of people, they have connected with the values of the organization and possibly the values of the person who founded the organization as well. So that's really the big lesson that we can learn from history of empires, of kings, anybody who's left a lasting legacy, any empire that has survived for a relatively long period of time, or any empire that has collapsed, that has failed, any business that has collapsed, that has failed, somewhere it is because the ideas may be great, but they have not touched the hearts, they have not touched the emotional connect of their customers or of their. So this is a question that I'd like you to leave to yourself, and I'm going to take a minute before I proceed. How many years would you like to be remembered in your organization? You don't need to share this with anybody. You certainly don't need to share it with me. Just have the number in your mind. I'm going to pause for a couple of seconds, and I want a specific number. Remember, infinity, forever are not numbers. You want a specific number, 2-digit, 3-digit, 10-digit, whatever. You have that in mind. But have the number ready, and then let me continue. Okay, so I'm assuming everybody has a number by now. I want to move on, and I think many of you will know that the eastern coast of India is called the Chola Mandala. The Chola Mandala is called so because of the Chola kingdom or the Chola Empire. Now, this is very strange because many kingdoms have actually ruled this area. So we've had the Palas in Bengal, we've had the Kalinga, the Odisha kings in Orissa, we've had the Chalukyas, the Pallavas, the Pandyas, the East India Company, the Mughals, the Ashoka the Great, Chandragupta Maurya. All the important kings of India have ruled this area, and yet this is called the Chola king. This is called after the Cholas, even after more than 1,000 years after the Cholas are no longer there. So even 1,000 years later, their name is there. So if you put a number that was any tangible number, I'm sure you can learn something from the Cholas in terms of the number of years you want to be remembered among the people that you work with. So let us look at what the Cholas did. Organizations are typically measured in terms of quantity. You might have how many branches do you have across the country? How many locations do you function out across the world? How many customers do you have? How many geographies do you have customers in? They're very important metrics for us today. So if you look at that metric, clearly you can learn something from the Cholas. So even today, Malaysia, for example, the state of Kedah, is the root word is Kadaram, which is a word that which comes from the Chola period. Cambodia comes from the Chola period again. Srivijaya, Indonesia, Bali, all of these still have a connection with the Chola. So when you look at geographical spread, we can clearly learn something from the Cholas in terms of how we can look at them for leadership lessons. Some of you say it's only quantity, but what about the quality? So when you look at the Cholas, they did well on that as well. So if you look at a product development, right, phenomenal sense of architecture in terms of the Brihadishwara temple in Tanjavur, which was built about 1,000 years back by the Chola kings, and it is a UNESCO World Heritage Monument. The central tower, it alone is more than 200 feet tall, and it is entirely hollow inside. So it's a remarkable feat of engineering where granite blocks are placed at such an angle that each block supports itself. And the entire building has been built without the use of any binding material, and there are zero mistakes in terms of the angles intersecting with each other, in terms of the connections with each other, in terms of the proportion and the symmetry, and all this brilliant architecture was done with just a hammer and a chisel. So the granite stone is is the world's hardest stone to carve, because it is very dense. It was not found in the region of Tanjavur. It was brought more than 120 kilometers away, and they brought it by ship or by the river. So imagine for a kingdom more than 1,000 years back to construct such a massive product with very primitive equipment, completely geometrically aligned, scientifically aligned, civil engineering wise, is a remarkable feat of achievement. And it was done with total accuracy. There's not one single careless mistake in that. So this is in terms of size. So you might say, okay, it's in terms of size. What about in terms of quality? Because it's not just about the number of products we create, right? Each product should be excellent in terms of what we create. There also we can learn something from the Cholas. Here is an example of a sculpture. The key shows you how small it is. It's just about a few inches tall. Again, the same granite that is hard to carve. Look at the level of attention to detail on this. You can even see the mouth, the face, the smile, and you can see a single profile. And you can even see the artist has, instead of just having a simple vine, he's put a little lion's head over here. So this is the attention to detail. So at one hand, you have massive structures like this, and at the other hand, you have enormous attention to detail. So it was not just so in an automobile industry, for example, right? You can't say that, oh, today I produce 1,000 cars per minute, because if every car, and which is this kind of a metric, but if every car had a quality problem, then there's no point in producing so many cars. So they were able to manage quantity. They were also able to manage quality. Everything that we know about the Chola kings comes from long temple inscriptions like this. This is in the Tamil, but of course, the Tamil script is a little different in those days. 100% of these inscriptions are found on temple walls, but 100% of them have everything to do with only economic, social issues. 0% have anything to do with religion or philosophy. So these inscriptions, they are like, in a way, they're like Ashoka's inscriptions. They're much older in the north, but then there was an interregnum at which many of these inscriptions were lost. Fortunately, in Tamil Nadu and a little bit in the south, inscriptions have survived. And all of these inscriptions, being economic, social, and political and legal records, they become very, very reliable sources of information for us to understand what was the Chola system of management that made them so successful. But to understand that, we need to look at religion in a slightly different way. Today, everybody in India looks at religious institutions predominantly only as religious institutions. But this need not be the case, because religious institutions are also institutions. They employ people, they have a top line, they have a bottom line. Many of these institutions might have a festival, which is like a product launch. So if we start looking at religious institutions also as institutions, we can get a lot of insight on how to run organizations and how people behave as well. And this is not something new. It's just a shame that we don't have this kind of a outlook in our history textbooks. If you look at the church in Europe, there's been a several years, decades of study of looking at the connection between the church and politics. Today, many anthropologists study Islam to look at why it is the world's fastest growing religion. So like that, if we tend to look at temples and religion as social institutions and organizations that change the behavior of people, that bring people together or divide people, whichever it is, they become very, very useful tools for us to understand how we can impart that learning into organizations as well. So Basically, this is a recap of what we've done so far. This is the lens that I'd like you to look at history. Our needs as human beings are eternal and universal. Therefore, if we start looking at history from the point of view of needs and fears, it becomes very relevant to us. I've also looked at how institutions that we work with as organizations are important for us to understand in terms of the way they function and the way people function. But for that, we can also learn from religious institutions. I'm going to look at Chola systems of administration and economics and politics as evidence from their inscriptions in temples that they built or they renovated. So one question that we need to ask ourselves is whether the Cholas were financially efficient, because that's an important criteria for an organization, right? This is a temple not very far off from my place of residence in Chennai. It's in Kanjipuram. And on the walls of this temple, and this wall alone is about 40 feet long by maybe about 10 feet tall. This is filled with a long inscription, which is dated about 1,200 years back. Now, 1,200 years back, a Chola king and a queen went to the temple, and they went into the sanctum and they gave a large gift of land to the temple. After they gave a gift of land to the temple, that land was marked, boundary markers were created. That entire gift was recorded on the walls of this temple. About 10 years or 15 years back, a group of epigraphists, who are people who study inscriptions like this, they went and they checked whether the temple still owned the land. They were amazed to note that not only did the temple still own the land, some of the boundary markers were still there, and that land and the boundary markers were still called the same. This was in a place of Kanjipuram, which for 1,500 years has seen many invasions, many changes, many natural calamities, and yet this has remained constant. And this is in a country like India, where today you lose your license and you go to the RTO. There's a good chance that the RTO can't find the license copy. You'll have to go by the photocopy that you have. So in terms of financial efficiency, in terms of quantity, in terms of quality, in terms of attention to detail, in terms of geographical spread, all of these are criteria that you use to judge organizations and performance today. Individual performance or organizational performance, we can learn something from the Chola. This is a sample of a Chola coin. This was minted by Rajaraja the First. He was the one who also built the Bradishwara temple that we saw a little while back. Rajaraja's copper coins can be found even today. They're really, really tiny ones. They were considered legal tender for more than 300 years after he died. That was a sense of confidence that he had in his people. And this is more can be said about the 1,000 rupee note that might still be on your wallet. So even in financial parameters, we can certainly learn something from the Cholas. Now, there are three things that the Cholas did which worked very well for them. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on the inscription. There is some writing available on the net. And anyway, I combine all of this into a workshop that I do, a 2-day workshop or a 1-day workshop that I do, which I co-designed with Devdutt Patnaik. So we can do the details over there. But let me give you a brief understanding. This is how a temple looks in Tamil Nadu. Of course, the Gopuram is missing here. On the walls of a temple like this, near Kanchipuram, in a village called Uttaramerur, is an inscription like this. And this inscription talks about the group of villagers meeting together and deciding to hold an election. There's another earlier inscription from the 9th century of another village in the Pandya region, further down south where I come from, Tirunelveli, where the villagers got together in the night and they decided that they were going to change the election rules. So many of us think that elections were a gift that the British gave to India. Not true at all. We had our election systems. In fact, they were harsher than they are today. So in fact, I think as a democracy, we've actually regressed in a way. So let me give you some sense of what these election inscriptions are all about. They say that if I have stood for a 2-year term, and remember in those days, anything that we expect from the government today, the temple did for the local community. So education, health, tax collection, employment opportunity, cultural recreation facilities, all of this was provided by the temple for the local community. And the temple collected taxes on behalf of the king. So the villagers got together and they said, look, the number of people in our village has changed. The number of new entrants has also changed. So we need to change the election system. And they said that, and the head of the temple, the village in that time was something called a Mahasabha, which would be elected by the landholding representatives of the village. And they decided that if you had a 2-year term, 13 different kinds of your relatives cannot take on another 2-year term. So imagine, look at our Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, and our Legislative Assembly composition. Look at how many relatives are there, and look at what the system was there in the before. And apart from this, there were many other rules. So, for example, if you deliberately prevented bills from getting passed, you would be fined an amount of money. Again, look at the way the current system runs. So, many other examples like this. The point that I'm trying to make here is that the Chola system of administration was so decentralized that a tiny village far away from the Chola capital had the authority to craft its own electoral policy, which is in a federal system today unheard of today. You can't expect, let alone a small state here, you can't even expect a Tamil Nadu to sit together and form its election process. That was the level of freedom that they had. So the reason that the Cholas were able to keep on to such a large territory across Asia was they highly believed in decentralization. Many organizations I know struggle with the whole conflict between the head office or the corporate office and the plants or the regional office. Here, the Cholas had got sorted out very well. And the basic premise was, I am different, you are different. Our needs, our skills, and our capabilities are different, which means that people are fundamentally different. And the local issues have to be sorted at a local region or at a local level, because that's where they really know what the pain is rather than from the center. So they had a very decentralized system. The only thing the king was responsible for was to collect taxes and maintain law and order in terms of external rebellion or civil war. This was the only job. The rest of it was all delegated to the local people. And this shows in mythology, in our philosophy, you notice fundamentally we believe deha dehi. People are different. And even for you, I'll leave this to you as a question. If you look at the most difficult relationship that you have, it could be with a relative, or it could be at work, it could be somebody you just can't stand the sight of. Somewhere you will find a big source of that difficulty in that relationship is because we want that person to be exactly like us. And that is impossible. Because for those of you who have two children or who have a sibling, you were born in the same house, you were brought up the same way, you might have even studied in the same school, you'd have had the same parenting, but as human beings, we are so different. So when our own two children are different, when our own two siblings are different, how can we expect somebody else to be exactly like us? Very difficult. So this is principle number one. And the way this is shown in our day-to-day practice is, you will find we have a Ganpati, Vinayak Chaturthi, we have a Deepavali, Lakshmi Puja, we have a Ram Navami, we have a Krishna Jayanti. All our gods have very different festivals. We cook different things, we celebrate them in different ways, which doesn't make smart sense, no? It's better to have a uniform way of celebrating festivals, but why don't we do that? We do that because all of these keep emphasizing that things are different. If our gods themselves are different, and we believe that God is within human beings, and human beings will also be different. So everywhere you see in our rituals, in our daily practices, even in our food, we'll find spices from the opposite end put together to balance each other. So all, and in some of the communities during New Year's Day or the regional New Year's Day, they'll make a dish which will have all the spices, bitter, sour, sweet, everything will be in the dish, to remind them that that's how life is, that there will be differences. Yeah. So this is principle number one that the Cholas used in their administrative system. The second principle comes from a very important temple in Srirangam, and just give me a minute. So in Srirangam, it's one of the world's largest temples, one of the most wealthiest temples, and in this temple is actually on the middle of an island. Okay, we're doing a long time. So it's on the middle of an island, and you can see the massive size. By the way, this is the second tallest tower in Asia, and it is a fabulously wealthy temple. It gets several lakh devotees, every month. And sometimes in a day itself, it gets many lakhs of devotees. And it is on the, like I said, it's an island on the Kaveri River. In the old days, about 1,000 years back, and even now, of course, the Kaveri had a lot of water first, and it would flood its bank very frequently. When it flooded its bank, the land will become unfit for cultivation. The temple will then auction off the land, and the highest bidder will get the land. Then the highest bidder will say, hey, I can't pay you the full land tax from the first year because I have to spend money in terms of getting the land back to order. So the temple will create a staggered tax slab rate. So it'll be 1/8 first year, then second year it might be 1/4, third year it'll be 1/2, then it'll be a little bit. So it'll go on over a long period of time. And what the temple will also do is to give the farmer advice and say plant areca trees first because they will grow up eventually and they will give us a lot of revenue. Plant lentils first rather than paddy because lentils don't need that much of rigorous cultivation at the beginning. And this deed will be drafted with all the other landowners in presence, and it will be engraved on a stone wall with the signatures of the witnesses. So you see the level of transparency they had at that point of time, and the way the temple helped that farmer to bring back the land to cultivation and therefore eventually get the temple revenues. Very similar to the SEZ policy that governments have today. So you start an export processing unit, you have a lot of tax slabs, you have a lot of tax concessions, help the person grow, and eventually when they become completely financially stable and viable, then you charge the full tax. And the principle here for the Chola kings was, if I help you first, you will help me next. Which is why I found many leaders have told me that one of their successes has been when they get into a room full of people, they never ask, what can I get from each one of these people? What's in it for me? They would rather say, what can I give to each of these people to make them successful? Because when I give first, I start the principle of reciprocity, and it is the principle of reciprocity that keeps human beings in a civilized world. And you'll find across every language, you will find we only have good words for people who give first, and we have only bad words for people who keep taking but never give back. And in mythology, they told this through stories. A person who keeps grabbing and never giving back, a person who keeps taking free things but never gives back anything to the people who give them, are called Rakshasas. They grab all the time, and nobody in the world wants to be called a Rakshasa. Which is why if you get something free, you're supposed to thank that person and you're supposed to do something back to them, and they do something back to you. So it keeps becoming a chain of give and take across. And an example that I would like to give from my own life, and I'm sure this may be connected to all of you in your own lives, especially in your ancestors' time. When I was young, I don't know, many people might even not know what this is. This is a well, which gives us groundwater. In the old days, in our family, in our home, we had a well like this, and there was many times when we didn't have electric power, which meant my grandmother had to haul water out of the well, and I would help her as a child early in the morning. The first bucket of water that she picked up, so there's the bucket for you over here. The first bucket of water she picked up, she will always throw into the ground. Oh, that was a stupid thing to do. So I'd ask her and say, Nani, why are you doing this? And she'd say, no, the water is a gift for us that comes from the earth. If I don't give the first pot of water back to the earth and thank the earth for it, next time I pour water, pick water from inside, it's not going to come. It'll be an empty well. And in a small ritual, she taught us how important it is for me to give first, especially to nature, because nature is already always giving us. And today you've noticed that when we take nature's giving for granted, what kind of messes that we come into. So whether it is in the administrative system of inscriptions in Srirangam with an SEZ concept, or it is in simple rituals, you will find always we look at what can we do for others first, number one. And when people give us something, what do we do for them in return? The third and the final principle is one of the most common inscriptions in temples across Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, and Andhra. This is a gift of a lamp to the temple. Like in those days, like in these days, in those days also, when people went to a temple, they would offer a lamp to the temple and they'll do a transaction with God, right? You give me this, I give you this. So the lamp will be either for somebody to get well, it might be for greatness of the king, anything, different reasons will be there. And this is how the lamp will look, right? You can see a small lamp over here. That's a stone lamp. Now, when the stone lamp is given to the temple will say, thank you very much, but you're not doing us a favor. Because when you give me the lamp, there is also a cost in terms of cleaning it, in terms of the oil, the wick. So the temple will say, give me something along with the lamp so that it's a sustainable gift. It's otherwise it's a concurrent expenditure, right? I need to get some money. So usually what the donor will give are goats. There's usually a calculation for this: 98 goats or 12 cows or 6 buffaloes. The milk from that goat will be turned into butter. That butter will be converted into ghee. That ghee will be used for the lamb. Then you'll say, okay, this is a good deal. The temple will refuse this gift also. Because if you are giving animals, then it's actually making the problem worse. Now the temple will have to look after these animals as well. So the temple will say, no, no, thank you very much. I can't do this. We run a temple. We don't run a dairy. Do that with somebody. So they will give this to somebody else from another village. That man will have to look after these animals. And anyway, you will have to specify as a donor how many hours you want that lamb to burn for. You can say only once a year, once every week, 3 hours every day, 1 hour every day, on your birthday, whatever you can specify. So you will know the quantity of ghee that is required. And that man will come and give it. Now, you would think, so there's a donor, there is a temple authority, and there is a cowherd who will look after these. The inscription actually looks at, and I wish I had done this through a Q&A, because I've done this in so many corporate groups. Nobody has ever got the answer right so far, except for one young boy in a school. There is a fourth party to the contract. Yeah, it's not the donor, it's not the temple authority, it's not the man who's going to look after the animals, it's actually the animals themselves. So the inscription will mention that every animal can't be milked consecutively. So if a cow has just given birth to a calf, that milk goes to the calf. You cannot milk that cow. You'll have to use another cow, which is why there's so many animals are given. So even the animal's welfare is thought of, and then the inscription will come. Now you will think that this is actually a silly idea. Why should you have that cowherd stay in a village far away from the temple? Because if you keep him next to the temple, it's easier to look after. And especially ghee is a perishable commodity. You'll want it transported quickly. Those days, they didn't have advanced transport systems. The principle was, because we don't do this today, which is why our cities and our villages have become like this, and there is so much of unrest. Because in those days, they said, if we kept all these cowherds in the same village, the economy of that village will thrive. But what about villages around us? So they would always look at ways to distribute the wealth. Going back to the earlier principle of saying, today we are saying, what can I get from villages? I want you to cultivate my rice. I want you to cultivate my wheat. I want you to cultivate and source. So our cities have become massive control freaks who are consuming from the villages but hardly giving much to the villages, right? This is not what happened in those days. So because the donor's gift of cows was given to the villager, a whole economy would thrive in that village over there. The temple will do a regular audit. If there were extra cows or animals or whatever, that man could sell them and keep them. If they were less, he has to replace them. So you see, in one gift of a lamb to a temple, the needs of all the people, including the animal, is taken care of. The administration of distribution of wealth is taken care of, and a sustainable system of looking after that gift is also taken care of. This is another symbol, or this is another classic principle, that we can be happy only if people around us are happy. And when we have to be happy, it's not just for the short term, it's for long term as well. So in the Indian philosophy, in the Indian management system, we don't have a concept of win-win, because in a win-win, it's only you and I win. We don't look at nature, we don't look at the society as a whole. The Indian concept is, it is a win for everybody in the short term and in the long term. So these are the three principles across Chola administrative decisions, whether it's land tax, it's property tax, it's urban tax, it's water sharing, water tax, caste disputes, criminal cases, civil cases, whatever. You have all of them. In all of these, you will find these three principles being applied in the judgment again and again and again. Now I want to come to you a free bonus. Right? This is a case of where somebody did something that we also have to learn from in what not to do. All of you in Delhi, and of course across India, you will all be familiar with Aurangazeb. Aurangazeb is somebody who's got a very, very checkered history in India. Some people love him, some people love to hate him. Yeah, why is this? Is something that we need to look at. Aurangazeb was a Mughal emperor. This is the time that he lived in. He is known for destroying many temples. Right? And this is true. He did destroy many temples, but he was not the only one who destroyed temples. Many others have destroyed temples, but they're not hated so much. And there are inscriptions, there are records, especially in the earlier part of his reign, where he's actually helped temples. He's gifted to temples. Yeah, he's also under a lot of bad press because he imposed the jizya. Yeah, but the jizya as a caste-based tax was a religious-based tax. It's not new to Aurangzeb. The Cholas, even the Marathas, many other kingdoms have also done it. So there also other people have also made the same mistake, but we don't hate them as much as we hate Aurangzeb. Now, some people say that the number of Hindus that he appointed was far higher than the earlier period, which is very true. But that can be explained in a very practical way. In those days, the people, you needed really smart, educated, operationally efficient people. It so happened that the majority were Hindus. They had that access to education, and therefore they would have been very well educated. So it's not for just these three reasons. They can all be explained away by different ways. Why do we tend to hate him so much? Number one. And second is for a man who lived his entire life. He fought bitterly with the Sikhs, with the Rajputs, with the Bijapur kings, with the Hyderabad kings in Bengal. Everywhere he fought hard. And yet look at what happened to his kingdom. That's how the Mughal Empire started. And that's how it was when he died. So actually, we should give him credit for uniting India. Yeah, because he has ruled the maximum part of India the way we know it. But within 20 years after he died, look at what happened to his empire with just 20 years. So here was a man who lived all his life fighting, fighting, fighting. He was a great one for leadership by example. So he was so frugal. He did not spend money in waste. In fact, one of the first things that he did was to stop a lot of the very grand processions and things like that in the Mughal court. So in today's time of organization saving money, he was a great example. Very frugal man. He knitted his own skull caps. He made money out of that to fund his grave. Deeply pious, deeply religious. And he, for a man who spent his entire life fighting to create such a massive empire, it's such a shame that within 20 years, it was reduced to far smaller than what Delhi is today. Why did this happen? If you look at the way he spoke, if you look at the way he treated people, you can clearly see that he was a man who believed in my way or the highway. And somewhere he was so austere, he was so frugal, he wanted that same sense from other people, and that's difficult. Yeah. And while he was so busy in conquering an empire, he never consolidated. He never learned how to bring the people together after that by connecting to their emotions, by connecting to their feelings, by making them feel good about themselves and bringing them into the umbrella. Yes, there would have been Hindus or Sikhs who would not have been happy with the Muslim king, but they might have still been okay with him if he had treated them differently. So I think somewhere his ability for people to not feel good about themselves, that really, and he did this with the same with his own children. Yeah. So in his tomb, these are he writes a whole list of values that he lived by, and look at the 10th and 11th value. Yeah. So here's a man who hated his children, who hated his siblings, constantly insecure, constantly worried that they will plot against him, and therefore he couldn't consolidate what did he create. And therefore, it's important for us not only to learn from the Cholas on how to conquer and how to administer. It's also important from Aurangzeb for us to learn. It's not just about winning a lot of customers. It's also about how you retain those customers. It's not about just getting into different geographies and building new branches and getting into those geographies. It's also about how you take care and consolidate those so that you can go deep. It's not just about the quantity. So if you keep eating bondas all day and sit on the couch and read books, especially even if they're fitness books and subscribe for gym memberships, you can't become fit. Yeah. So you need many small acts or rituals that you need to do on a day-to-day basis that will bring you back to these themes. And one of the rituals is these kind of rangoli. So you see one pattern here, another pattern here where you loop across the dots. I don't know in the northeast and west, I don't know whether you have this pattern a lot. You definitely have these. Now today we do rangolis as a design. There's actually a lot of philosophy in this, and it is these kind of small things that we take for as rituals today. They actually have a deep significance, and they will go back to these three principles that I've shared. I've shared a few already. Here's one last one. A dot and a line are the basics of any drawing. A dot can be representative of the vagina or the female essence. The line can be representative of the penis or the male essence. Yeah. A rangoli is complete only when the dots and the lines come together, which means that you need both the feminine energy and the male energy to live life. Now, for example, how can we raise a good kid? Sure, the mother gives birth, but it's also the father who started the job, right? So both these energies are equally important. And you can say the what feminine energy is the water energy of love, nourishment, because that's what the egg does, right? It holds the sperm and it nourishes it. And the male energy is the fire energy of getting stuff done, which is what the sperm does. It moves forward, it searches for something. It's a task fulfillment. So in a rangoli, the lady who does the rangoli will immediately know that you need both the feminine energy of love and nourishment and the male energy of task accomplishment and fire to get a job done. A rangoli using the same dots and lines can be done in multiple ways. So she's learning, therefore, that you can solve the problem in multiple ways. You can look at the issue in multiple ways as well. Within the rangoli is so fragile that even as you're doing it, it can be deleted or it can be destroyed. So when you're doing the rangoli, then you realize that however beautifully you do it, everything will end. There will be an expiry date for everything, but it's okay. You can always start again with the same dots and lines, but with infinite different combinations. So what the lady is telling herself is, look, in life, I need both the male energy and the female energy. I can bring them together in multiple different ways. Even if I bring them together, I can start anywhere and finish anywhere. So there are many ways to do it. Even if I finish it, it can get destroyed, but it doesn't matter. Everything gets destroyed. I can always start again and create something new. And these rangolis were usually done during transition times, because transition times are the times when there are borders or boundaries, when we are most vulnerable, and these were done at those kind of times. So these kind of rituals, and I'm sure in your community, in your region, you will have multiple small rituals like this, which many of you may have forgotten. But my request is to go back and look at how these rituals may connect to the 3+1 principles that we've learned today, because they'll all have a connection some way or the other. So basically, if we follow these principles of the Cholas and we don't do what Aurangazeb done, we move away from a Ran Bhumi, which is full of blood and conflict and fighting with each other, to a Ranga Bhumi where we are filled with the diversity. People are different. It's difficult to work with them. Relationships are messy. You have to compromise sometimes. You have to do things that you don't like. Others will have to do things that they don't like. But it brings together the rainbow. It brings together possibility rather than looking at poverty. So the Indian system of performance is, in the Western system, we typically look at tasks before relationships, which is why we even have the word leader, right? The leader is the one who leads, who takes it forward and does it. In the Indian system, we don't have a leader. In fact, Indian languages don't even have an accurate translation for the word leader. We have ruler, Raja, but we don't have leader. In the Indian system, we say, fix your relationships, tasks will automatically get done, and performance will happen. So this is basically the principle that I had to look at. So just to do a recap, in the Indian system of history and mythology, we believe needs and fears are eternal. So you can look at history from the angle of what kind of needs and fears did people have. And if you want to leave a long legacy, you can learn from the Cholas, because they top it in all the organization parameters that you have, in terms of quantity, in terms of quality, in terms of attention to detail, in terms of financial solvency, etc., etc. Three things that the Cholas did was they operated from the principle that people are different. We'd like everybody to be exactly like us, but that doesn't happen. People are different. The second is they believe that if we help others first, they will help us next. And also the reverse of that is, if we get something from somebody else, we need to give them back something the way they want it. And the third thing was, in terms of when there are parties to a contract, there should be some there should be some benefit in the short term and the long term for not only all the parties in the contract, but in the environment they live together as well. And if we do all these things together, we get something called Mangalyam, which is a word that we don't use often in India, Mangalyam means a state of being that attracts good health, good wealth, and good luck. And the workshops that Devdutt and I we designed was based on this whole Mangalyam principle. And I'm certainly happy to talk about that at a later point in time. But I think I've taken a long time now. Let's open the floor for questions.
Pradeep, great. It was absolutely, what a learning experience. Yeah? I mean, simply unbelievable. The first question that I have is, how and when did you learn to connect history with business or, life as it is? Most of us have learned history as dates in school textbooks.
Yeah. So as I started researching for my PhD, which is again on the same theme of leadership and history, and I'm also writing a book on that now, which should be out next year for sure, August, September sometime. I started seeing that and there are more than 40, 50,000 lines of inscription that look at how these issues were resolved. And I started seeing a pattern in the resolution of disputes, but I couldn't put my finger on the model. Devdutt and I were on a trip together, and I was talking to him about this, and we realized that I had proof, but I didn't have a model. In his wonderful book, The Business Sutra, he had a model, but he didn't have historical proof. He had proof of mythology, but he didn't have historical proof. And that's how we both came together. And we were able to see that if you start looking, if lens is different, then you start looking at the subject different.
Okay, fabulous. And another question was, so you were last working for McKinsey? That was your last job?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what made you quit and come across on the other side?
So I still continue to be associated with McKinsey. It's a wonderful organization, and I'm very happy to have been a part of it. And I continue to be associated with it in a small way. I think it came at a time when I was about 40 years old, and I had done leadership development work. I had learning and development for a very long period, about 15 years by then, 20 years by then. And I realized that I was only doing Western models of leadership. And I wanted to find out what was the Indian answer to this. And I must record that they were very helpful in terms of helping me transition out. I had a sabbatical and then I went on my own. And I think that was really the thing, to find out what's the Indian answer to all of this.
Oh, so that is brilliant. Huh? What was the Indian answer to all this? That was something
If,
outstanding.
for example, you have the Vedas today, right? The Vedic texts are more than 4, 5, 6,000 years old, and they have survived intact. And this is remarkable because in organizations, the biggest worry that we have is what the chairman wants is something that's never done in the shop floor level. So how could they bring about something for such a long time?
Okay, yeah. I mean, there's another question is that for most of us, history has always been dates because of what we have learned to, I mean, learn by rote, which is by hearting dates. The question papers were also such wherein, you had to answer what happened when in history. So how do we kind of unlearn now and get back to relearning history in a very interesting way?
Well, you can read the book when it comes out or go for the workshop when I do it. But that's the easiest way to do it. But another way to do it is to just look at this lens, Rajendra. Constantly say, what is the deeper need and fear that person had? How did he or she work through that?
Yeah.
It just comes, it's a skill with practice. And I mean, ultimately, it's our choice, right? I can keep cribbing and saying, oh, they didn't teach it to me right. Oh, I didn't like it and all. But sure, they didn't. I mean, I had to study it. I studied it. I got my marks. I've moved on now. How can I make use of it now?
That's a fabulous take on it. How can I move? How can I take in terms of learning from it, and what do I do right now? That brings us to remember that we're working on a joint workshop, which is with our modern business learning from history. So we will tell the viewers more about it later on. Something very interesting questions about you So when did you start learning about history? I know you took us through a journey when you used to go to the attic and learn about your family history, but when did you really start learning history, which was first maybe history of Tamil Nadu and then India and then global history?
Always, I think from school time itself, definitely, very passionately, definitely in the last 20 years, 25 years. But I've always been interested.
Hmm.
Always.
And something that the audience does not know about in terms of, some fabulous aspects of you. So, what is your favorite household chore during the pandemic?
Sorry, what is the favorite?
What was
Oh, cooking.
cooking? Oh, so
I did a good job. I
you
could
did a
get
good
my
job,
idlis
huh?
and dosas right and chutneys and all sorts of things. Cooking was good fun. And I have an 11-year-old and we enjoyed playing a lot of traditional games as well. So we had a good time during the pandemic.
So
Yeah.
we'll have to come home to
Why not?
and eat authentic idlis and
Why
dosas.
not? Absolutely. Why
Yeah.
not?
And do you watch a lot of television? So, what was your favorite show?
Oh, I watch a lot of Netflix. I love they had a series on the Roman Empire. They had a series on the Constantinople. That was good. So I liked all that. But right now I'm watching Doc Martin.
Ah, Doc Martin.
Yeah.
So this is interesting to know, team. Next time we should get Netflix to sponsor.
Yeah. Why not?
It's becoming
And I
good.
love watching Transformers as well.
You love watching Transformers.
Transformers.
One word or phrase that's been overhyped during this pandemic. Anything that you can. What is completely you keep hearing, and as for you, it's an absolute overhype.
I think it's just this whole work from home thing. I mean, honestly, the way I'd like to look at these things, Rajendra, and again, it's an example of a great king called Shivaji the Second from history. He was given a very raw deal by the British, and that didn't stop him from doing what he had to do as a king. So I hear a lot of this whole, this has happened, that's happened. But if you look at people who've really achieved things in life, and through my consulting experience, I've had the good fortune of spending a lot of time with chairmen and managing directors at the boardroom level. They're all people who don't complain. They just say, well, this is the reality. Let's move on and make what best we can out of it and then get going. So I'm not the one to sit back too much and figure out to complain about what's wrong. I think for me, the pandemic, it was difficult financially, but it helped in terms of building a closer connection with my son. A lot of my writing was accomplished. I got 2 books in the pipeline, actually 4 books in the pipeline, including my thesis. So it was time well spent.
That's brilliant.
Life gives you lemons. You just make lemonade out of it. Yeah, that's all.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Make lemonade out of the lemons. Yeah, awesome. Tell me one last thing. In terms of which place would you really love to travel once
Oh,
this pandemic is?
I love Mongolia.
Oh, you
Mongolia is
love.
my favorite holiday destination. I've been there twice.
Awesome.
Camping in the Gobi Desert is a unforgettable experience.
And you would want to go there, right?
I would anytime.
Again,
Yes.
yeah. So
Anytime.
at the Wanderers, we'll take care of you.
Why not?
Definitely, definitely.
Why not? Absolutely.
So we're almost at the end of this, and it's been such an insightful and inspiring talk. When you history. I mean, I've always loved history and geography. It's been my forte. But a lot of us have learned it like, dates, figures, facts. You've taken it so much more beyond the way you've linked us, linked it to like thank the earth, which we always have learned from our ancestors to thank the earth. What can I give? And something to the business world. Building customers is not just important. How do you retain them? Simply, and everything can end, yet you can begin, and start all over again. What great takeaways, And what is your favorite quote before we end?
Well, chitte prasannam bhuvanam prasannam, chitte vishanam bhuvanam vishanam, athobilasha vidite sukesya, chitte prasade prathumam yatesya. So if you think the world is bountiful and radiant, the world is bountiful and radiant. If you think the world is dark and vicious, the world is dark and vicious. So before you change the world, be aware of yourself.
Okay. It was an absolute delight listening to you today. And thank you for gracing our chat show on outdoor wilderness and learning. We wish you good health, Hope to see you again soon. And great. Thank you, Pradeep.
Thank you.
Thank you
Namaskar.
so much.
See you there.
Bye.
Bye-bye.